Hello, everybody. This is Ian Williams, President of the Foreign Press Association, and I'm very pleased to announce and introduce Maria Fernanda Espinosa Garces, who is the was the last declared candidate, but there's another one come rushing in at the last moment for the Secretary Generalship of the United Nations, a position of much importance and much renowned, but one wonders just how much influence we have in it. So we've had Maria before. She has visited the Foreign Press Centre in the past, and I'm looking forward to hearing what she has to say because she was president of the General Assembly, which incidentally, since Lord of the Universe was mentioned before, it actually officially outranks the Secretary General on the protocol lists. I think you're due for a 21-gun salute as president, but you're being demoted down to an 18-gun salute if you achieve Secretary Generalship. But I'm sure these are the least of your concerns. So, Maria, I mean, it's an invidious position you've put yourself to because I was very carefully thinking the questions, and I thought if I give you a question and you give the answer that I would like, then you would almost certainly get one of the vetoes marshaled against you. So it really is a very difficult position because of the vetoes and the five permanent members, and especially with the efficient nature of politics at the moment, where there is not much room for cooperation in the top echelons of diplomacy. So, why did you decide to enter into this daunting field? Perhaps you start off by explaining that. And once again, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian, for having me, and thank you to the Foreign Press Association. I think that you have a very important role to play. Thank you for the interest in following the race for the selection of the next Secretary General. I think that your question was, why is that you decided to put your name forward? My decision was carefully thought, and I went through a process of consultation with key member states to explore their expectations, to see if there was appetite for more people in the race, if they felt that there was a gap in the current, in the no, the then options that the Security Council had to choose from. And after careful listening tour, I decided to put my name forward. And to be very frank, I had been called by several member states to say, you should put your name forward. My country is ready to put your name forward and nominate you. And so, of course, I took the decision. It coincided with a special invitation and call from a country for whom I have a great respect, Antigua and Barbuda. Not only it is a small island developing state, but it's a leader in the multilateral space. It's a leader in the SEEDS agenda. Actually, the Small Island Developing States agenda, it's called the Antigua and Barbuda Action Agenda. And I said, cannot be better because it's a country from my region. It is a country that is seen as a neutral player, as having a very constructive role in the multilateral space. So I felt honored and privileged, and I decided to put my name forward because I think I'm the best candidate, because I come from with 25 plus years of experience in UN affairs, because I have worked and connected to the three pillars of the UN Charter. I have worked on the peace and security sphere as Minister of Defense, but as ambassador in New York and Geneva. In Geneva, I was also ambassador to disarmament, and of course, being ambassador here in New York, foreign minister, defense minister, and a long experience in working through the UN for decades, knowing the system very well, but coming from the ranks of member states. I have never worked for the UN. I have never been a part of the UN system. And that gives me also a little bit more independence and free hands to make the changes that the organization needs today. So experience, my trust in the UN in spite of needing this, transformation and this deep reform. But I'm a strong believer in the importance of the UN as an irreplaceable organization. And I bring my decades of experience in the system. So that were the reasons why. Of course, I'm not naive. I know exactly what the challenges ahead are. It's not; these are not easy times for humanity. We are experiencing the highest number of conflicts after the Second World War. We are not in the best place, but I am an optimist, but a pragmatic optimist. I think we can make the UN deliver better.
Well, deliver better, where one of the problems with the UN is it sometimes seems there is no there because people talk about the UN and they're talking about the Security Council, or they talk about the UN and they're talking about the General Assembly, or they're talking about the UN and they're talking about the various development agencies. And each of them has a particular role. And if I can quote myself, I think it was John Bolton once said that if the top 10 floors of the UN were to disappear, no one would notice. And being extra cynical, I think I added in an article at the time that if the top 34 floors would disappear, it might be better, because when the UN tries to do something, it often makes a mess of it or is not allowed to. Whereas the UN is a symbol above all. It stands that there is something between God and the Congress and the US Congress, that there is an international law, there is an international order. So how would you balance the various aspects of the UN's work? Can you balance it?
I think I join the general feeling that the UN can do better, that there is a trust deficit, that there is an implementation gap, a huge implementation gap between the decisions that are made, the commitments that are made, and our capacity to deliver. I agree. There is a trust deficit because the UN is really not serving we the peoples, the first phrase of the UN Charter, as it should. But at the same time, I think that the UN has done a lot of good to humanity, and people tend to forget, the role of the UN in the decolonization process, the role of the UN in being the number one infrastructure on humanitarian deployment. Being there where no one else is, in the toughest places, in the most violent places. You can see the UN doing what the UN has to do, which is to protect people and to save lives. The UN is called to do that. How the UN operates in protecting children, in working with member states to strengthen their capacities at the national level as they build their institutional strengths. So there is a lot of good in the UN that never makes the headlines, unfortunately. What makes the headlines is where the UN was absent, didn't do enough, etc. And it's only normal because that's the culture we have as humans, to really put up in a bolder in bolder font the things where we fail, but not the things where we succeed. And with that said, I don't think that the world could do without the UN. The UN is irreplaceable. The UN brings the political traction and energy of 193 countries that sit in the General Assembly, in the same seats, with the same microphone to speak, with the same button to vote on issues that are of essence for the future of humanity, from artificial intelligence to pandemics. So we should not forget that. The Security Council, which Prime's role is to prevent conflict and to address the pressing conflict and to guarantee peace and security. We see that there are problems there, but it doesn't mean that it's not needed. It's highly needed, no? And then there is the secretariat, let's say the bureaucratic scaffold of the organization that is there to implement the mandates established by member states. So there needs to be this harmony between the mandates, the political decisions, no, the delivery capacity of the UN Secretariat, the programs and agencies, no, and really come with a mission-oriented UN from all ends, the political end, the implementation end, no, the capacity end, and the resources that come with the mandates. It's not an easy alignment. There is no easy solution. It has to be built, and it has to be built under a good leadership. And that's why the next selection of a Secretary General is so vital for the future of the UN. The UN has to be relevant, has to be where it needs to be, has to be modern, has to be swifter, has to be leaner, and has to adapt to the current times. And that's what the next leader of the UN has to commit to, of course.
Well, as obviously, if you want to change in the United Nations, you want more than one term. But the problem is, if you have more than one term, hanging over you all during the first term is the fact that if you do anything that one of the permanent five disagrees with, you might end up like Boutros Ghali being shown the door because of a capricious veto. So is there any way you can get around the one-term problem and preserve your independence in the face of that looming threat? Or can you declare that you don't care what they say, you will go for it, and it's up to them, shame on them if they decide to penalize you for doing the right thing?
Well, I think the success of a Secretary General is to be perceived as an impartial, honest broker that is able to work with every single member state, that has an open door policy, that is able to engage with everyone, that can communicate with the main constituency in the House, which are member states, no, and be accountable every day. The duration of tenure of a Secretary General is not written down. It has been the practice of 2 terms of 5 years. The decision lies entirely in the hands of member states, but I strongly believe that a Secretary General should be accountable to member states every day of her tenure. That's the only way that the organization would be able to really reach a point of excellence and a point of deserving the trust of the people it serves. So duration of terms in hands of member states, of course, and the Secretary General being accountable to member states every day.
Well, we always come circling round to the fact that a Secretary General is more accountable to 5 states than to the other 88. So it's how do you foresee circumventing that? I mean, I know as several presidents of the General Assembly, I remember your distinguished predecessor, Ambassador Rizali from Malaysia, who announced that he was going to get his reform of the Security Council through in 1 term. I think that was 25 years ago now. So that we're still waiting. I mean,
I think accountability, Ian, is a culture. To be responsible for your actions and responsible for your inactions, it has to be embedded in the way the Secretariat and the Secretary General first does business in the House. I have been looking at what is the accountability infrastructure that the UN has. It's very convoluted. It's not clear. And this is something that we need to take seriously. The role of the Joint Inspection Unit, the role of the Internal Oversight Office, the role of the 50 units on monitoring and evaluation in the House, the Board of Auditors, the Controller. It's a very convoluted structure that has to be well known to member states, and we have to use it in full. I strongly believe in a culture of accountability, in a culture of transparency, and a culture where self-assessment is the norm. Improvement has to be a daily exercise. And whether you're more accountable to some member states or other member states, I think accountability has to be a built-in device into the way the organization does business.
Well, once again, you have a dichotomy between, if you want an international civil service that's independent and effective, you have to insulate it from pressures of renewable contracts. It's a bit like your contract as Secretary General, perhaps. If you're on there for 2 or 3 years, you're not going to do anything that alienates your bosses or ambassadors. And, what one very old veteran UN staffer told me once, his advice when he first started was, do nothing if you want to succeed in the UN. Because if you do something, you're sure to upset somebody. If you do nothing, then you haven't ruffled any feathers and you can be effective. That's not a very dynamic culture to inculcate.
Well, certainly, and my style of leadership is not about doing nothing. I'm a hardworking, committed leader, and I think that the UN needs that energy, that traction, that knowledge, that commitment. And I think that a leader cannot succeed if she's not joined by a very able mission-oriented team as well. There is a lot of work to do within the system, the human talent in the system. We have the best people. There is a need of some better communication, some healing within the UN staff. It's vital to ensure that we really bring the UN to the 21st century finally. And there's nothing an organization can do without a motivated staff. And this is a serious matter. And believe me, I'm not in the group of people that think that that doing nothing is what is going to bring the UN where it needs to be. So I will put all my energy, my decades of experience, the traction, the stamina I have to serve the organization, not only the organization, but to serve the organization so the organization can deliver foreign people in need, for the people that are the most vulnerable, the forgotten, and to regain the trust of public opinion, to make sure that we deserve that trust. Trust is not declared; it's something that you earn with hard work and with commitment. And that's what I'm ready to do.
Well, the two aspects of the reform. One is everybody, I think, agrees that the organization, 80 years old, needs reform. But what does reform mean? Does it mean let's slash all the things that we don't like and take the money away? Or let's just take the money away and make do with what we have? Or let's concentrate on things that we can just about tolerate and look good, but let's not put any money into something that might have a real effect. What does reform mean? Can we agree on the terms?
Well, I have to say, Ian, I've been connected to the UN for the past 30 years. And since day one, even when I was working for IUCN, I remember the UN was about reform. No? So this is not a new issue. Reform and delivering as one in one UN and the 3-pillar reform. And so the UN has gone into different cycles of reform. Today, the UN continues to be under reform in this current situation because of a very profound liquidity crisis. In my opinion, it's a liquidity crisis not because there is not enough money in the world. There's plenty, no? But because the liquidity crisis is the symptom of a deeper legitimacy and credibility crisis. So that is what we need to look at. Currently, there are two tracks for reform: the implementation of the Pact of the Future that was adopted in 2024, by consensus by all member states. It's a roadmap to reform many of the pieces of the UN, from issues on management. It includes even reform of the Security Council. It includes implementation of a new digital compact that is in progress. And we have the UN80 response to the financial crisis of the UN. It's more complex. I don't want to go into the details, but what I have to say is that there is a little reform fatigue in the UN. The current reform is an inevitable reform because we have less resources. But having less resources and having to exercise austerity also helps the organization to focus on priorities, to ensure that mandates are connected to resources, and that the UN can deliver better. A UN that is more modern, that is leaner, that is faster, and that has the systems in place that allows the organization to be more impact-oriented and less process-oriented. Especially at the UN, and I have that experience, people confuse activity and process with impact, and we need to be better at that. The UN80 process, even if it was born as an inevitable response to the financial crisis, I think it's going to help the UN refocus, prioritize, look at budget discipline, look at what is that the UN is best at, where is the value added of the UN, because we have to acknowledge that the UN is not the only game in town anymore. There are very strong regional organizations. There are countries that have decided that their priority number one of their foreign policy is to be peacemakers, to be mediators. And we have to use that energy and this new scenario to find where is that the UN has the most value added. And just put a lowercase to the word reform, because it has to be part, again, of the way the UN does business. Self-assessment, the ability to be self-critical and improve the way it delivers every day. So it cannot be a one-off, a UN80 reform process, a one-off, and then let's start from the beginning. It's to embed good mechanisms for monitoring and evaluation, for self-assessment, for improving the way we deliver as part of the institutional culture. So this is easy to say, difficult to do, but I think that we are in good track.
I think it was one of your issues as well. I've been following the Human Rights Council since it first started, and there were great efforts at the beginning to make sure there were elections for the seats there. The drafters, who at the time, including the United States, that never actually joined it, were very eager to make sure that countries were elected and were responsible for their decisions. And now, like many of the UN systems, there's a rota basis. So we know, I think there's up to 20 years in advance sometimes which country is going to adopt a position, will assume a position in the UN system, like in the Human Rights Council. And this, obviously, if we have a flagrant human rights violator or a country that doesn't pay its dues on the Finance Committee, for example, it's going to be very difficult to get accountability, because this is corrosive throughout the system. It breeds cynicism amongst both staff and the public and other countries watching it. Can you see a way out of this, to name and shame the perpetrators and say, no, that country should not be on the Human Rights Council, or no, that country should not be on the budgetary committee till it pays up?
Well, this, frankly, I don't think that's the role of the Secretary General to blame and shame. As mentioned before, Ian, I strongly believe that a Secretary General should be this impartial and perceived as impartial a broker, honest broker, to make sure that she remains impartial, but partial to only one thing, which is partial to uphold the UN Charter principles and international law. The way member states are elected to different bodies are decisions that are taken by the member states, of course. And if I served as ambassador in Geneva, and I served at the Human Rights Council, and the 47 member states, as you know, they are elected, and they are elected according to regional groups. They have to campaign when you aspire to have a seat at the Human Rights Council. You have to show your record. It's part of the dynamics of the organization, and I think it's important. And in countries that aspire to be in the Human Rights Council, they have to show their records. I think that the human rights system in the UN has become extremely complex because you have endless increasing mandates, decreasing budgets, very demanding reporting mechanisms to the treaty bodies, to the special procedures, the VNRs, the UPRs, the periodic reviews, the work that the Third Committee does here in New York. So the system has become very, very complex. From the secretariat part and the role of a Secretary General, the Secretary General has to be the main advocate for human rights, but also make sure that in-house, all the programs and agencies, the Secretariat places human dignity at the center. Everything the UN does has to be about protecting people and about human dignity.
So, I mean, we're talking about impartiality for a Secretary General, for example, is the implication. But can you be impartial if one country is flagrantly violating international human rights law or just plain international law with invasions and assaults on human dignity? Can you afford to be impartial, or do you have to come down and say, no, that's wrong, you can't do that, and risk the seeming lack of balance?
Well, as mentioned, the Secretary General has to be impartial to member states with regard to member states, partial to the respect of the Charter and international law.
Okay, which is difficult. Obviously the elephant in the room is just down the road in Washington. How do you reconcile the most powerful state, founder member of the United Nations, that sometimes basically declares it's going to use the UN when it suits, as in the Board of Peace, but ignore it the rest of the time? So, I mean, how do you stop the UN just being used as I call it a blue fig leaf, to cover up what the naked aggression and power building from some countries? And I mean, almost everybody in the Security Council is doing that at the moment.
The UN is formed of 193 member states, and we have to respect the entire membership of the United Nations. Each member state bring to the organization their aspirations, their expectations, their challenges, their spirit of cooperation, their priorities. No, and basically what is important is to harmonize national interests with international cooperation. In my opinion, both issues can be harmonized. They can happen at the same time. International cooperation, the respect for international law, it doesn't counter national sovereignty and national interest. And again, here, the role of the Secretary General is to keep channels of communication, spaces for dialogue, and quiet diplomacy and prudent reach out always as a possibility. That is the role of the Secretary General.
One would say almost your only power is your ability to put items on the agenda, regardless of whether a country does that. And it's a power that's used quite sparingly in case it upsets the Security Council. But can you envisage the circumstances in which you would say this? You cannot overlook this. I insist you have to discuss this issue, whether it's an invasion or a massacre or a famine or climate change, for example.
Again, as mentioned before, the Secretary General is this impartial player defending the Charter, defending international law, being seen as the person to go to when there are problems. And I am a strong believer in the power of quiet diplomacy, of using back channels, of keeping the doors open for dialogue, even in the most difficult circumstances. And that's the role of a Secretary General, to be present, to be seen, to be perceived by all member states as this neutral player. And to be impartial doesn't mean to be passive. On the contrary, engagement, open doors, constant communication. You mentioned the issues you put on the agenda. The Secretary General doesn't put things on the agenda. The UN is an organization that is mandate driven, and the mandates emerge, are born from member states. And the Secretariat, of course, has to provide the Secretariat support to support member states as they implement their mandates. And that's the way we should see us and perceive a Secretary General, a person that is present, that is persistent, that is seen as impartial, that has the energy and the legitimacy to be where she needs to be.
Every Secretary General has come out with similar complaints of with Boutros-Ghali, it was, I have no police, I have no army. And they keep giving me these mandates. What can I do about it? And I think Trygve Lie told Dag Hammarskjöld, this is the most impossible job in the world, and so on and so on. Now, it leads almost back to my first question. Why the hell do you want this job? But I mean, I can see why, of course. But it does raise some serious questions about whether you really think you can balance all of these different forces to try to get them to do things that they mightn't want to do.
The Charter says, Ian, the Secretary General is the Chief Administrative Officer of the UN. But I also believe that the Secretary General should be the Chief Administrative Officer, so keep the House well organized and ready to support member states in their needs and as they implement their mandates, to be a good manager, to ensure that there is accountability, budget discipline, impact-driven secretariat. But she has to be the diplomat in chief, seen, respected in the places that matter, from being present at the spring meetings of the multilateral banks, to be present in the G20 and the G7, be invited to where the main discussions are taking place, to be a convener, because the platform of the UN is irreplaceable, to bring the energy and the political traction of now all these groups that are so influential and so important. With the G7 just finished, we are getting close to the G20 meeting here in the United States. You have the BRICS, you have regional organization as powerful as the African Union. the UN has to be this global platform. This is a tremendous power. Believe me, it's not only about the power of armies and police. I've been a Minister of Defense myself, but the power of legitimacy, the power of credibility, the power to be a universal convener. No, the UN, the ability to not being only the top diplomat but the top advocate to communicate what the UN is about and what the UN is doing. I think the UN also suffers from a crisis of communication. The headlines you see about the UN are not always positive, and I think we need to go the extra mile to ensure that people, the people we serve, public opinion, understand very well what is the role of the UN. And of course, being critical when the public opinion needs to be critical, but also understand the value of the UN, understand what the UN brings to humanity, be sure that people are aware what humanitarian workers do every day. What country programs what the peace building initiatives of the UN in how they operate on ground. What is the UN doing in Haiti with the BINU, with the office and the support office right now? I think it's not a coincidence. I mean, the humanitarian deployment of the UN with hundreds of humanitarian workers killed every day because they're putting their own lives to the service of people in need. This is also the UN. And I think, of course, we have to keep our a spirit of self-criticism, our culture of improving the way we deliver every day, to have this reform with lowercase being part of the way we deliver every day, be accountable, of course, but also acknowledge that the UN is irreplaceable, that we need the UN. We need this universal platform that brings everybody together. So that is why I want to be the Secretary General of the UN. I believe in the UN. I believe in the potential of the UN. I am convinced that we can make it work better. And I have the tools, I have the experience, I have the knowledge to make it happen.
Okay, now, as part of your testing on solo diplomacy, where are you going to advance your candidacy over the next few days? I gather you're on a world tour. Today's Thursday. It must be New York. Where's the next place?
Well, I am visiting capitals, of course. I'm engaging with leaders. I want to listen from them. I want to share what are my views about the future of the UN, but mostly I want to listen to what their expectations are. So I will be traveling a lot this coming weeks. Is part of the race. Very happy and with all the energy to do that. Well, the next months are going to be decisive, but I'm not afraid of challenge. On the contrary, I'm infused with energy and with commitment.
Well, thank you for sparing your time in this grueling schedule to talk to us. And we hope to see you again soon. And we'll catch up with, follow your progress with interest.
Thank you. Thank you.
Applaud you there. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks to you for the interest. Thank you to the Foreign Press Association for this space. So thank you, and I'm at your disposal.
Many thanks. This is Ian Williams, President of the Foreign Press Association, and we've been speaking to Maria Fernanda Espinosa Garces. I think I got all the names there.
Yes.
Former Foreign Minister of Ecuador, former President of the General Assembly, and current candidate for Secretary Generalship. We look forward to hearing from you again. Thank you very much, everybody.